When it comes to land, buildability is a big question, and it isn't always obvious. A property can look developable on paper, but not pencil out once all the factors affecting the property are evaluated together. Hey, it's Evan Zener with Metro Land Pro. I help landowners understand their property and the factors that affect what can be built on it. I'm licensed in Oregon and assist sellers nationwide. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the main physical factors that limit what land can be used for so that you can compare them to your own property and see where limitations may exist. If you find this helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. Thank you. Zoning. Zoning is the first filter. It determines whether a development is allowed at all and what types of use are possible. Some zones are intended to limit or restrict development, such as agriculture, open space, conservation, or resource-based zoning. Even when development is allowed, it's typically very limited. Zoning also sets basic requirements a parcel has to meet, like minimum lot size, frontage, width, and depth. If a property doesn't meet those standards, it can be in a buildable zone and still not qualify for development. Zoning tells you what types of development are allowed on paper. It doesn't tell you whether the site can actually support that development in practice. If you're reviewing zoning for a property, these are the main things to look at: the zoning classification and what uses it allows, minimum lot size, width, and frontage requirements, setbacks, height limits, or coverage rules, whether the existing lot can actually meet those standards. Utilities and capacity. Once a potential property is identified, utilities are often one of the first items on the checklist. If basic services aren't available or can't reasonably be brought to the site, development often becomes unrealistic. Water and electricity are typically easier to work around. If they're nearby, they can often be extended or upgraded. Sewer is different. Sewer availability and sewer capacity are some of the most common deal killers. Even when a sewer line is close, there may not be enough capacity to serve an additional development at all. In other words, the pipe can be there, but the city may not be able to take on additional demand from it. When evaluating sewer for a site, it usually comes down to a few core questions. Is sewer actually available to the site? Is there enough capacity to support what zoning allows? Are off-site upgrades required to unlock that capacity? Are alternatives allowed, or is sewer the only option? Access. Access is one of the most common constraints that limits what land can be used for. The issue usually isn't whether access exists, it's whether the existing access supports what the site is trying to do. A property may have legal access through frontage, an easement, or a private road, but that access still has to meet current safety, design, and capacity standards for the development being proposed. This often comes down to things like the type of road the site connects to, available site distance, emergency access requirements, and usable frontage. If access doesn't meet those standards, it can restrict layout options, reduce density, increase required improvements, or place a hard cap on what the site can support. If you're evaluating access for a property, look at what type of road the property connects to, whether site distance meets current standards, emergency access requirements for the intended use, and how much usable frontage the property actually has. Topography and geotechnical. Topography and soil conditions affect how much of a property can be developed and how complex that development becomes. Slope directly impacts grading, excavation, and foundation design. As slope increases, more excavation and grading are required, layouts become more constrained, and construction costs rise. On steeper sites, layout, access, and drainage become more complex, often requiring retaining walls, slope stabilization, and additional engineering or environmental review. At the same time, geotechnical conditions look at what's below the surface and how the soil behaves. Things like soil stability, groundwater, and prior fill, soil that was brought in and placed on the site, influence foundation design and earthwork decisions. and are typically evaluated alongside slope and grading. Because earthwork is often one of the largest cost items in development, slope can increase cost to a point where a project no longer makes sense. If you're evaluating topography and soil conditions for a property, look at overall slope and how much of the site is affected, where the more buildable portions of the site are, drainage patterns and how water moves across the site, any known landslide, groundwater, or prior fill issues. Environmental overlays and critical areas. Environmental overlays are rules layered on top of zoning. They exist to protect environmental features or manage risk. These overlays commonly include wetlands and buffers, floodplains, steep slope protections, and habitat or tree retention areas. These overlays don't usually stop development outright. They limit where and how development can occur. Most often, development is still possible, but at a smaller scale or under tighter constraints than zoning alone suggests. In more severe situations, those constraints can become so restrictive that development is no longer practical. If you're reviewing environmental overlays on a property, look at whether any mapped overlays apply to the site, how much of the property is affected, what buffers, setbacks, or no disturbance areas are required, and how much usable area remains after they're applied, and whether additional studies or mitigation are required. How to think about buildability. Buildability usually isn't determined by a single issue. In some cases, one condition alone can stop development, but more often it's several constraints layering together that make a site impractical or fully infeasible. Each factor on its own might seem manageable, but when access, utilities, slope, soil conditions, and environmental limits are evaluated together, the combined effect is what ultimately defines what the land can realistically support. This is why a property can look developable early on, but not pencil out once the full picture comes into focus. If you want help understanding which of these factors apply to your property and how they may affect buildability, I'd be happy to help. You can reach me at evan@metrolandpro.com or visit www.metrolandpro.com. I'm Evan Ziener with Metro Land Pro, and I help landowners sell smarter and unlock the full value of their land.